أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ياسين والقرآن الحكيم إنك لمن المرسلين على صراط مستقيم تنزيل العزيز الرحيم لتنذر قوما ما أنذر آباؤهم فهم غافلون لقد حق القول على أكثرهم فهم لا يؤمنون إنا جعلنا في أعناقهم أغلالا فهي إلى الأذقان فهم مقمحون وجعلنا من بين أيديهم سدا ومن خلفهم سدا فأغشيناهم فهم لا يبصرون وسواء عليهم أنذرتهم أم لم تنذرهم لا يؤمنون إنما تنذر من اتبع الذكر وخشي الرحمن بالغيب فبشروا بمغفرة وأجر كريم إنا نحن نحيي الموتى ونكتب ما قدموا وآثارهم وكل شيء أحصيناه في إمام مبين واضرب لهم مثلا أصحاب القرية إذ جاءها المرسلون إذ أرسلنا إليهم اثنين فكذبوهما فعززنا بثالث فقالوا إنا إليكم مرسلون قالوا ما أنتم إلا بشر مثلنا وما أنزل الرحمن من شيء إن أنتم إلا تكذبون قالوا ربنا يعلم إنا إليكم لمرسلون وما علينا إلا البلاغ المبين قالوا إنا تطيرنا بكم لئن لم تنتهوا لنرجمنكم وليمسنكم منا عذاب أليم قالوا طائركم معكم أئن ذكرتم بل أنتم قوم مسرفون وجاء من أقصى المدينة رجل يسعى قال يا قوم اتبعوا المرسلين اتبعوا من لا يسألكم أجرا وهم مهتدون وما لي لا أعبد الذي فطرني وإليه ترجعون أتخذ من دونه آلهة إن يردني الرحمن بضر لا تغني عني شفاعتهم شيئا ولا ينقذون إني إذا لفي ضلال مبين إني آمنت بربكم فاسمعون قيل ادخل الجنة قال يا ليت قومي يعلمون بما غفر لي ربي وجعلني من المكرمين وما أنزلنا على قومه من بعده من جند من السماء وما كنا منزلين إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم خامدون يا حسرة على العباد ما يأتيهم من رسول إلا كانوا به يستهزئون ألم يروا كم أهلكنا قبلهم من القرون أنهم إليهم لا يرجعون وإن كل لما جميع لدينا محضرون وآية لهم الأرض الميتة وأحييناها وأخرجنا منها حبا فمنه يأكلون وجعلنا فيها جنات من نخيل وأعناب وفجرنا فيها من العيون ليأكلوا من ثمره وما عملته أيديهم أفلا يشكرون سبحان الذي خلق الأزواج كلها مما تنبت الأرض ومن أنفسهم ومما لا يعلمون وآية لهم الليل نسلك منه النهار فإذا هم مسلمون والشمس تجري لمستقر لها ذلك تقدير العزيز العليم والقمر قدرناه منازل حتى عاد كالأرجون القديم لا الشمس ينبغي لها أن تدرك القمر ولا الليل سابق النهار وكل في فلك يسبحون وآية لهم أنا حملنا ذريتهم في الفلك المشحون وخلقنا لهم من مثله ما يركبون وإن نشأ نغرقهم فلا صريخ لهم ولا هم ينقذون إلا رحمة منا ومتاعا إلى حين وإذا قيل لهم اتقوا ما بين أيديكم وما خلفكم لعلكم ترحمون وما تأتيهم من آية من آيات ربهم إلا كانوا عنها معرضين وإذا قيل لهم أنفقوا مما رزقكم الله قال الذين كفروا للذين آمنوا أنطعموا من لو يشاء الله أطعمه إن أنتم إلا في ضلال مبين ويقولون متى هذا الوعد إن كنتم صادقين ما ينظرون إلا صيحة واحدة تأخذهم وهم يخصمون فلا يستطيعون توصية ولا إلى أهلهم يرجعون ونفخ في الصور فإذا هم من الأجداث إلى ربهم ينسلون قالوا يا ويلنا من بعثنا من مركزنا هذا ما وعد الرحمن وصدق المرسلون إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم جميع لدينا محضرون فاليوم لا تظلم نفس شيئا ولا تجزون إلا ما كنتم تعملون إن أصحاب الجنة اليوم في شغل فاكهون هم وأزواجهم في ظلال على الأرائك متكئون لهم فيها فاكهة ولهم ما يدعون سلام قولا من رب رحيم وامتازوا اليوم أيها المجرمون ألم أعهد إليكم يا بني آدم لا تعبدوا الشيطان إنه لكم عدو مبين وأن اعبدوني هذا صراط مستقيم ولقد أضل منكم جبلا كثيرا أفلم تكونوا تعقلون هذه جهنم التي كنتم توعدون اصلوها اليوم بما كنتم تكفرون اليوم نختم على أفواههم وتكلمنا أيديهم وتشهد أرجلهم بما كانوا يكسبون ولو نشاء لطمسنا على أعينهم فاستبقوا الصراط فأنى يبصرون ولو نشاء لمسكناهم على مكانتهم فما استطاعوا مزيا ولا يرجعون ومن نعمره ننكسه في الخلق أفلا يأكلون وما علمناه الشعر وما ينبغي له إن هو إلا ذكر وقرآن مبين لينذر من كان حيا ويحق القول على الكافرين أولم يروا أنا خلقنا لهم مما عملت أيدينا أنعاما فهم لها مالكون وَذَلَّلْنَاهَا لَهُمْ فَمِنْهَا رَكُوبُهُمْ وَمِنْهَا يَأْكُلُونَ وَلَهُمْ فِيهَا مَنَافِعُ وَمَشَارِبُ أَفَلَا يَشْكُرُونَ وَاتَّخَذُوا مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ آلِهَةً لَعَلَّهُمْ يُنصَرُونَ لَا يَسْتَطِيعُونَ نَصْرَهُمْ وَهُمْ لَهُمْ جُندٌ مُّحْضَرُونَ فَلَا يَحْزُنكَ قَوْلُهُمْ إِنَّا نَعْلَمُ مَا يُسِرُّونَ وَمَا يُعْلِنُونَ أَوَلَمْ يَرَ الْإِنسَانُ أَنَّا خَلَقْنَاهُ مِن نُّطْفَةٍ فَإِذَا هُوَ خَصِيمٌ مُّبِينٌ وَضَرَبَ لَنَا مَثَلًا وَنَسِيَ خَلْقَهُ قَالَ مَن يُحْيِي الْعِظَامَ وَهِيَ رَمِيمٌ قُلْ يُحْيِيهَا الَّذِي أَنشَأَهَا أَوَّلَ مَرَّةٍ وَهُوَ بِكُلِّ خَلْقٍ عَلِيمٌ الَّذِي جَعَلَ لَكُم مِّنَ الشَّجَرِ الْأَخْضَرِ نَارًا فَإِذَا أَنتُم مِّنْهُ تُوقِدُونَ أَوَلَيْسَ الَّذِي خَلَقَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضَ بِقَادِرٍ عَلَىٰ أَن يَخْلُقَ مِثْلَهُم بَلَىٰ وَهُوَ الْخَلَّاقُ الْعَلِيمُ إِنَّمَا أَمْرُهُ إِذَا أَرَادَ شَيْئًا أَن يَقُولَ لَهُ كُن فَيَكُونُ فَسُبْحَانَ الَّذِي بِيَدِهِ مَلَكُوتُ كُلِّ شَيْءٍ وَإِلَيْهِ تُرْجَعُونَ صدق اللہ العلی العظیم. سورۃ المبارک الفاتحہ.
بر محمد وآل محمد صلوات. اے شام کے لوگوں میں بنت علی ہوں. اے شام کے لوگوں میں بنت علی ہوں. میں وارث تطہیر ہوں. میں وارث تطہیر ہوں. ناموس نبی ہوں. اے شام کے لوگوں میں بنت علی ہوں. بازار سے دربار میں لے آئے ہو مجھ کو. چاہوں تو جلا سکتی ہوں خطبوں سے میں تم کو. صابر کی بہن ہوں جو میں خاموش کھڑی ہوں. اے شام کے لوگوں میں بنت علی ہوں. افسوس کنیزی میں اسے مانگ رہے ہو تم جس کے غلاموں کی غلامی میں رہے ہو. یہ ظلم نہ ہوگا کبھی میں زندہ بھی ہوں. اے شام کے لوگوں میں بنت علی ہوں. اپنے پیمبر کو اگر دیکھنا چاہو، نیزے پہ جو یہ سر ہے اسے غور سے دیکھو، ہم شکل پیمبر ہے یہ، میں اس کی پھوپھی ہوں۔ اے شام کے لوگو، میں بنت علی ہوں۔ زہرا کو بھی دربار میں تم نے تھا بلایا، دربار میں بھی ہوں، مگر فرق ہے اتنا، پردے میں تھی وہ اور میں بے پردہ کھڑی ہوں۔ اے شام کے لوگو، میں بنت علی ہوں۔ زنجیروں میں جکڑا جو یہ بیمار کھڑا ہے، سجدہ اس کعبے کی فصیلوں نے کیا ہے، منصب میں بڑا وہ ہے، میں رشتے میں بڑی ہوں۔ اے شام کے لوگو، میں بنت علی ہوں۔ زندہ تھا تو در در کے ہمیشہ ہی لڑے ہو، اب سر ہے تو ہونٹوں پہ چھری مار رہے ہو، تم کتنے بہادر ہو میں یہ دیکھ رہی ہوں۔ اے شام کے لوگو، میں بنت علی ہوں۔ میں وارث تطہیر ہوں، میں وارث تطہیر ہوں، ناموس نبی ہوں۔ اے شام کے لوگو، میں بنت علی ہوں۔ اے شام کے لوگو، میں بنت علی ہوں۔ سورۃ مبارک الفاتحہ۔
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Sayyid Shabbir, Kirmani, respected elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Surah Al-Fatiha is requested for the Isala Sawab of Marhumeen listed on the screen, and for all Marhumeen, Al-Fatiha. Bismillah. Ayama Yujib is requested for the names listed on the screen and for all those in need here and elsewhere. Let us recite together 5 times. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Amma yujibu al-mudtarra idha da'a wa yakshifu as-su' أَمَّن يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ وَيَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ 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 اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Ladies program, Sufra of Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salam will be held here on Friday, March 5th at 3 p.m. for the ladies. Food drive. The outreach team is embarking on a new initiative beginning with the wiladat of Imam Ali alayhi salam. Whenever there is a niyaz served at the Masjid for Rajab or Shaban, they will be collecting donation to sponsor food to a local shelter. We request $5 per person, however, any amount is welcomed. Donations can be made via PayPal or the website as shown on the screen. For tomorrow's vaccine distribution at Masjid al-Hayy, if you know anyone over 65 or non-hospital healthcare workers, please contact Sister Minaz Manekia at the number on the screen, or you can message her as well. Finally, if you or your child is interested in reciting during programs held here at the Masjid, please reach out to Brother Ali Raza Kirmani at 407-619-2021 for the gents, or Sister Jamilat Ghulam Hussain at 407-255-5112 for the ladies, or sign up using the link on the screen. Jazakallah. At this time, I would like to invite Sayyid Shabbir to come recite tonight's Majlis with one Surah with Surah Al-Mubarak with Muhammad. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
رحم الله من قرأ سورة المباركة الفاتحة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد ونستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم بسم الله أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. فوضوا أمري إلى الله إن الله بصير بالعباد ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل ونعم المولى ونعم النصير. والصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على الرسول المسدد المصطفى الأمجد المحمود الأحمد الذي سمي في السماء بأحمد وفي الأرض بأبي القاسم محمد. اللهم صل وعلى أهل بيت الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين المنتجبين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. اللهم صل. وقل رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. أما بعد، قال الله تبارك وتعالى في كتاب الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل لا أسألكم عليه أجرا إلا المودة في القربى. صدق الله العلي العظيم. زينوا مجالسكم بالصلوات على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل. My respected elders, brothers and sisters in Iman, Salamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Question: who is Sayyida Zaynab? We're told there's a moment in time where the messenger of God, Rasul al-Azam, is returning from a journey and he's returning from a trip. When he's returning back to the city, when he's returning back to Medina, at that point in time, he receives news that his daughter Fatima al-Zahra is expecting a child. When he receives news that his daughter Fatima al-Zahra is expecting a child, he enters into the blessed house after her birth, and he is told that he has had a granddaughter in the form of Sayyida Zaynab salamullahi alayha. He takes this beautiful girl in his hands, and he begins to look at her, and he gives a statement there at that point in time. After naming her Zaynab, that is the ornament of her father, he says, this individual, this beautiful baby girl that has been born, she is the second coming of my wife Khadija. What did he mean by this? We'll look at this idea and understand this personality. The individual that you and I are here to commemorate tonight, in these brief moments that we have together, is such a great personality of history, such a magnanimous personality of history, that this lady, that the mission of Karbala is not complete without this lady. Allahu Akbar. Who is Sayyida Zaynab? Who is this individual? That imamat of Imam al-Hussein is on one side, and imamat is imamat, no doubt about it. But the mission of the imam is not complete without his sister Sayyida Zaynab. Who is Zaynab? Who is this individual? Can we do justice? There's no way we can do justice. But glimpses and moments of her life that we study and analyze so that we can have a way or a candle on the path of understanding what is truth in today and this era and this time. Because in understanding Lady Zaynab salamullahi alayha, we get a guide for us in the 21st century. Her movement before Karbala and through the journey from Medina to Karbala, and after Karbala, from Karbala to Kufa, on to Sham, and back to Medina, and also according to riwayat to Egypt, and to Sham once again, and all these narrations that you've heard, it gives us an understanding of, for example, the position of leadership in Islam. We sometimes think that leadership is only for men, for example. Whereas when we come to our followership of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, we understand that on one side there is Rasul al-Azam, there is the Holy Prophet, there is Ali ibn Abi Talib, and there is Hussein ibn Ali. At the same time, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in parallel, He kept Khadija, Fatima and Zaynab. In parallel. That is, we as followers of Ahlul Bayt are not those individuals who say women have no rights, women have no prestige and honor and integrity. Rather, women themselves, in the likes of Lady Khadija, and the likes of Lady Fatima, and the likes of Lady Zaynab, tell us and show us the position and the responsibility and the rule and the role of women in a society. Because sometimes you're hearing this narrative in our world today, Islam doesn't give rights to women, Islam doesn't give rights to and positions to women. I invite those people who ask this question to read the research of Professor Ruth Rodad at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. She studied 40 bibliographical studies, volumes of women in early Islam. She's not a Muslim, obviously. She said, I studied 40 bibliographical surveys of Muslim women in early Islam. You know, bibliographical surveys are not just 1 page or 2 page. They're volumes and books upon books. She said, I did not find any instance of discrimination against women. Rather, I found that women in early Islam were well ahead of women in other parts of the world for their time, for their zaman and makan, for their time and space. For example, women had inheritance rights. For example, women had rights with respect to their husband. Women had property rights. These were all things that Muslim women enjoyed at that time, 1400 years ago, which in some parts of the world still, unfortunately, women don't enjoy. Now, when we come to Lady Zaynab salamullahi alayha, in the brief minutes that I have with you, I want to cover a glance of very much in a very brief time. Number one, I want to look at what is the lesson that you and I can derive in our lives with respect to the personality of Sayyida Zaynab salamullahi alayha. Number one. Number two, what were the circumstances with respect to what family she married into, what was that family, and how did she grow up? What were some glimpses of her life before Karbala? Because when we begin to speak about Lady Zaynab salamullahi alayha, usually many times we begin with Karbala. But there's a story before that. What's that story? The next level is what led up to Karbala and how did she go to Karbala. The fourth level I want to look at is with respect to what happened after Karbala. On the way, when she got to Kufa, her khutbah in Kufa, then in Sham, when she got to Sham, what was her khutbah and her lecture and her sermon there with respect to that? And finally, I want to give some merits and fadail of Lady Zaynab salamullahi alayha. And of course, this is the mother of Musibah. We will discuss her masaib inshallah in this night. This is our agenda for the brief moments that we have together. Wherever you are, here in Florida or wherever you are hearing my voice, from the bottom of your heart, send a salawat on Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. With respect to Sayyida Zaynab salamullahi alayha, from the Islamic perspective, she is not only someone who is known as alima ghayr muallima, the lady who is a scholar without a teacher. That is, her level of knowledge was so exalted that after the Imams, perhaps one of the most highest levels of intellect was of Sayyida Zaynab. She's also known as Aqila Bani Hashim. That is the logical, the intelligent, the intellectual of Banu Hashim. A Banu Hashim in which everyone is an intellectual. A Banu Hashim in which everyone is intelligent. But at the same time, I want to give a lesson here. Because Sayyida Zaynab embodies for my youth and especially the next generation, and for all of those, Sayyida Zaynab in her persona embodies one of the most valuable traits for success in life. Period. You may not take my word for it, allow me to explain. The University of Pennsylvania is an Ivy League institution which is one of the most renowned in the world. The University of Pennsylvania had conducted a study. Researchers there, for example, Angela Lee Duckworth and others, did a study on what is the most valuable trait for success in life. Is it intelligence? Is it intellect? Is it wealth? Is it family connections? Is it network? What is it that whether you are in the field of military, whether you are in the field of business, whether you are in the field of economics, whatever field you are in life, what is that one trait that if a person has this trait, they are more likely to succeed than anything? What is it? Is it intelligence? Is it connections? What is it, wealth? No. They found that whether you are in the military, whether you are in business, whether you are in economics, whatever it is, the most valuable trait that one can possess in life is a trait called grit. G-I-R-T, grit. Grit is what? Grit is defined as perseverance over a prolonged period of time. Perseverance over a prolonged period of time. That is not giving up. You only lose when you give up. And if anyone embodies perseverance over a prolonged period of time, it is none other than Sayyida Zaynab. How else can one go from Medina to Karbala, from Karbala to Kufa to Sham, under the circumstances in which she went, and not succeed? In fact, Harvard University was sued because of its criteria, refers to discrimination. I don't want to go too far off, but after 200 years, they had to reveal what is the criteria by which they select students. And one of the traits that they looked for was grit, because that indicated if someone will succeed or not. Sayyida Zaynab teaches us that no matter what the circumstances, no matter how difficult, no matter how dire, if you and I have trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we can go through the path. We can succeed. But that trust and that perseverance comes in the personality. And the second thing that Sayyida Zaynab teaches us, which is extremely valuable, is that Sayyida Zaynab teaches us about gratefulness and gratitude. That statement that Sayyida Zaynab said, in the most dire, in the most difficult circumstance, looking the evil man in his eye, she said, Ma ra'aytu illa jamila. I saw nothing but beauty. He was saying that Allah did this to you and your family. And she says, what? Ma ra'aytu illa jamila. Analyze and think about that statement again and again. We'll come to it inshallah. But I want to come to Sayyida Zaynab in her life before Karbala, a very important level. We are told when she was born, as I mentioned, Rasulullah gave her the title of Saniya Khadija. We typically say Saniya Zahra, that she is the second coming of Zahra, because she is the daughter of Fatima Zahra. There's nothing wrong with saying this, but this is something that we have created, because it's the daughter of Bibi Fatima Zahra. But when we come to Rasulullah, Rasulullah said, no, she is the second coming of my wife Khadija. Why? You see, because if you look at the life of Bibi Khadija salamullahi alayha, before her marriage to Rasulullah, she lived a life of affluence. She lived a life of opulence. She lived a life where she had everything from the financial, material aspect of life. She had no need of anything. But when she married Rasulullah, she gave up everything to the point that in Shabbir Abi Talib, the valley of Abu Talib, she is eating the remnants of leaves in order to survive, and she died in that state in Shabbir Abi Talib, as you know very well. Rasulullah said the same thing, that my granddaughter Zaynab will have a similar journey. She will go from an environment where she seems to have every luxury of life, and then she will go through Karbala and Kufa and Sham. You know, sometimes when you don't have much, badahir in the worldly sense, it's easy to sacrifice. But when you are seeming to have everything, and then you have to give it up, it's very difficult for an individual, because you adjust to certain things. If you know the hedonic treadmill in psychology, you'll understand what I'm saying. Sayyida Zaynab went through the same journey as her grandmother, Lady Khadija. Because if you look at the life of Sayyida Zaynab and her mother, Lady Fatima the Zahra's life was difficulty from beginning to end. She got married at a very young age, she died at the age of 18. Bibi Fatima the Zahra, Rasulullah told her that when you marry Ali, don't ask him for anything, because he's living in a very economical environment. He doesn't have wealth. So Fatima the Zahra's life was difficult from beginning to end. She was in that situation where she was helping her father when they threw the intestines on Rasulullah. She was cleaning him off. When he would go to Taif, she would clean him off, but from the blood that he was soaked in, from the stones that they threw on Rasulullah. Fatima al-Zahra, from beginning to end, she saw Shabbir Abi Talib, she saw the difficulties of the door, she saw every difficulty. But Lady Khadija and Lady Zaynab, they had a relatively, easy period. This gives us two lessons. The two lessons, it says that, number one, just having wealth doesn't necessarily mean someone is bad or evil in any way whatsoever. Because if that was the case, then Lady Khadija would not be there as an example, and Lady Zaynab would not be an example. The question you and I have to ask ourselves is that, do we control our wealth, or does our wealth control us? Because when Sayyida Zaynab, when Islam was on the line, she forsaked everything. She let go of all her wealth, property and everything, and she went straight to Karbala. That showed that this wealth didn't control her, she controlled the wealth. So who did she get married to? According to the riwayat, she got married to an individual by the name of Abdullah ibn Ja'far al-Tayyar, the relative of the family. Abdullah was the son of Ja'far al-Tayyar. Who was Ja'far al-Tayyar? Ja'far al-Tayyar was considered the one who is the first one who had his hands severed and cut in the battle of Mu'ta. Mu'ta is in modern day Jordan. He was killed at that point in time. He was also the one who led the caravan from the Arabian Peninsula, from Mecca to Abyssinia, Ethiopia, modern day Ethiopia, to Abyssinia. And they went and met the ruler Najashi. Najashi gave them amnesty and he allowed them to stay there. When they began to recite the verses of the Quran, at that point in time, Najashi, Rasulullah told them to go. When they went and they reached Africa to Abyssinia, Najashi said, recite unto me. They recited the verses of the Quran. Najashi drew a line in the sand and he said, the difference between Muhammad and me is just this line. He said, you have freedom to stay here. This individual, Abdullah ibn Ja'far al-Tayyar. Ja'far al-Tayyar was his father, the one who took the caravan to Abyssinia. In fact, you will know that Rasulullah had a wife by the name of Habiba. Do you know who Habiba was? One of the wives of Rasulullah. She was the sister of Muawiyah. She was in Abyssinia at that time. And the person who did the nikah of Rasulullah was Ja'far al-Tayyar. The same way that the one who recited the nikah of Rasulullah and Lady Khadija was Abu Talib, the son of Abu Talib. Ja'far al-Tayyar is the one who recited the nikah of Rasulullah with Habiba at that point in time. This Ja'far al-Tayyar, in the battle of Mu'ta, his hands were cut. When his hands were cut, Rasulullah said to him, said about him, that Ja'far al-Tayyar is the one, because Tayyar means the one who flies. He said, Ja'far al-Tayyar is the one who flies in the heavens with wings. Allah has replaced his hands with the ability to fly in the heavens and like the angels. That is also why one of the laqab or alqab or the titles of Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas is Saniya Ja'far al-Tayyar, the second coming of Ja'far al-Tayyar. Because Abbas's hands were severed like the hands of Ja'far al-Tayyar before him. Now, I want to say one thing. There's a moment in time, which I mentioned just 2 nights ago, you'll remember Khaybar. When Ali ibn Abi Talib conquered Khaybar, when he, after the Rasulullah said, "La yutiyanna rayata ghadan rajulan kararun ghayra fararun yuhibbullah wa rasul," that whole thing that tomorrow I will give the flag to the one who is a man who is advancing, karar, ghayru farar, he is not retreating. At that point, when Ali conquered Khaybar, Rasulullah at that point in time notices that at the same time he's coming, Amir al-Mu'mineen is coming from Khaybar, at the same time Ja'far al-Tayyar is returning with the conquest and the mission from Abyssinia, with the caravan from Abyssinia, from Ethiopia. When they're both returning at the same time, Rasulullah gives a statement. He says, I am so happy, I am so joyous, but I don't know what I should be more happy for. Should I be more happy for Ali ibn Abi Talib coming with Khaybar's victory, or should I be more happy seeing Ja'far al-Tayyar coming with the Muslims? Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. This is the place that Ja'far al-Tayyar held in the heart of Rasulullah, very close connection. And when Ja'far al-Tayyar was killed in the battle of Mu'tah, when his hands were severed, Rasulullah, he began to weep and he was very sad. In fact, he told them that he told Fatima, he told the family, make sure that you send food to the house of Ja'far al-Tayyar and I will go and visit. Now, pay attention here please, inshallah, my dear audience. At that point in time, when this happened, Rasulullah said, make sure that don't let them light any of the furnaces to cook food. They've just had someone who they've lost, Ja'far al-Tayyar's family. This is the act of Ayyam al-Jahiliyyah, that the family has to cook. In the Muslim empire, there are family and friends who should bring food. Therefore, she said, Fatima, bring food for them so they have food in their house. We won't ask them to light the stove. They've just lost a loved one. So we'll bring food. Rasulullah brought food and he went to visit and give his condolences to the house of Ja'far al-Tayyar. When he came, by the way, I should mention before this, Ja'far al-Tayyar, you'll remember the very famous namaz Ja'far al-Tayyar, or salat of Ja'far al-Tayyar. Do you know what the power of this and why this was given? The salat of Ja'far al-Tayyar is so powerful that when Ali returned from Khaybar and Ja'far al-Tayyar returned just after that, all the Muslims who were there and those who were in the city at the time, they all had a part of the Baytul Mal or the public treasury or the war booty that was won at Khaybar. But Rasulullah said, as per Islamic fiqh, O Ja'far al-Tayyar, because you have come a little late, you weren't here during the war, during that time, and you came afterwards, you do not have a part of this Baytul Mal that has come from Khaybar. We can't give it to you, as per Islamic law. Look, in terms of principles, the Ahlul Bayt didn't compromise. Islam doesn't compromise. He says, you're my relative, Ja'far al-Tayyar. Very good. But I cannot give you something that you don't have a right over. But he said, can I give you something that if you act on it, it will be just as good, if not better, than all the money of Khaybar put together? He said, Ya Rasulullah, please tell me what is that. Then Rasulullah taught him namaz Ja'far al-Tayyar, or salatul Ja'far al-Tayyar. My dear brothers and sisters, if you have a financial difficulty, the best salah to recite, or any other difficulty for that matter, particularly our ulama say that recite Ja'far al-Tayyar. In fact, according to the ulama, this is something that is mustanad, guaranteed that it's correct. Even the amal of Laylatul Raghaib, which many of you remember, the ulama say the way to fix it is to recite Ja'far al-Tayyar. I don't want to get too far off. Nonetheless, Rasulullah goes to the house of Ja'far al-Tayyar after he's been martyred, after he's been shaheed. When he goes, he gives his condolences. When he gives his condolences, he comes out of the room and he goes into the living room or the drawing room, the place where he sees a young boy playing. When he sees this young boy who's very young at that time, he's playing with some, what we would call toys. When he sees this boy, he says, Salaamu alaykum, wa alaykum as-salam. He said, what are you doing? The young boy was Abdullah ibn Ja'far al-Tayyar. He said, Ya Rasulullah, I am doing business. He was playing, he was a young boy. People have habits, some people like racing, some people. He said, Ya Rasulullah, I'm doing business. At that time, Rasulullah gave him a dua that we wish Allah would give any one of us, that Allah's messenger would give. You see, whenever you're in the most difficult and dire situation, Ahlul Bayt have told us that there's three things that can help you. Number one, do dua when you look at the Kaaba. Looking at the Kaaba, Allah's house in Mecca, look at the Kaaba and do dua, Allah will accept it straight away, number one. Number two, is if your mother is alive, ask her to do dua for you. It gets accepted straight away. As per the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. Says number three, if you can, put your hand on the head of an orphan and ask for dua. Allah grants it straight away. Abdullah ibn Ja'far al-Tayyar had just been orphaned. Rasulullah put his hand on his head. Not for any other reason, but because putting your hand and showing affection to a child that has just lost their parent is an act of harmony, is an act of peace, is an act of tranquility and love that sometimes that child doesn't get. Remember Ali ibn Abi Talib, in his final moments, Amir al-Mu'mineen in Ramadan on the 21st, he says a line that he says, Allah, Allah fil aitam, Allah, Allah fil masakeen. He says, by Allah, never forget the orphans and never forget the poor. Imagine, a man saves his last breath for the most valuable lesson. What does Ali say? The orphans and the poor, never forget them. Rasulullah puts his hand on the head of Abdullah ibn Ja'far al-Tayyar and he says, may Allah give you barakah in your business. And how was Rasulullah's dua accepted? What barakah did Allah give Abdullah ibn Ja'far al-Tayyar in his business? Do you know how much wealth Abdullah ibn Ja'far al-Tayyar had? He was the Federal Reserve by himself. He was the Federal Reserve of the United States, for example, in the modern terms, by himself. He was the World Bank by himself. He was every economic institution by himself. In fact, when Amir al-Sham, when Muawiyah needed a loan, he would go to Abdullah ibn Ja'far al-Tayyar to get money. Abdullah ibn Ja'far al-Tayyar was the guarantor of anyone's loan. If two people were arguing between themselves and they didn't have any solution, they would say, Abdullah is my guarantor. Go and ask him for it. And if someone took Abdullah ibn Ja'far al-Tayyar's name, they would say that, fine, it's done. Because Abdullah not only had, he would also give. This is a falsafa, this is the philosophy of wealth in Islam. You see, in Islam, the principle of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is such that the wealthy are custodians of Allah's wealth. That is, when you get the wealth, you are to give it. Use what is necessary for you. Use what is needed for you. But beyond that, that is the amana of the people that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has entrusted you with. And this is what Abdullah ibn Ja'far al-Tayyar showed. Whenever there was a financial difficulty, he was the first to pay off people's financial difficulties. And by that way, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him more and more. In fact, he had so much property, which you may be aware of, in Sham. In fact, one of the theories as to why he went back to Sham, as to why Sayyida Zaynab ended up in Sham was because, for example, according to some, they say that Abdullah ibn Ja'far al-Tayyar had a lot of property in Sham and they went on that journey. Nonetheless, Abdullah had no shortage of wealth. But at that time when Amir al-Mu'mineen said, had it not been for Abdullah ibn Ja'far al-Tayyar, there would have been no one to marry my daughter Zaynab. The same way, remember Ma'suma Qawm, you remember Lady Ma'suma Qawm? There was no one to marry her. There was no kufu. There was no comparison to her. Therefore, she never married in her life. Or not, that's what our ulama say. The same with Sayyida Zaynab. Had it not been for Abdullah ibn Ja'far al-Tayyar, there would be no one to marry Sayyida Zaynab. Sayyida Zaynab married Abdullah ibn Ja'far al-Tayyar. When they got married, according to the riwayat, they asked Abdullah ibn Ja'far al-Tayyar's new wife, Sayyida Zaynab, "Oh Zaynab, how did you find your husband?" He said, "Wonderful, he gives me everything that I need, I am very happy, alhamdulillah." "How's the home?" "Home is very good, alhamdulillah." "Is there anything that is short in this house that you need?" She gave one statement to history. She said, "There's one thing that's missing from my life." He said, "What is that?" "That's my brother Hussein. My brother Hussein is missing from this house." This was the connection between Fatima al-Zahra's two children, Zaynab and Hussein. From the beginning, they were at one of the highest and strongest connections. Sayyida Zaynab is also the one, by the way, who is the khutbah of Fadakiyya. The khutbah of Fadak is through Sayyida Zaynab. Sayyida Zaynab is the historian who is narrating the khutbah of Fadakiyya. So at once, she is the one who has this deep spiritual connection, but she is also the glue, if you will, of the Ahlul Bayt. That Fadak, the one who is narrating Fadak, and the one who heard it directly from her mother is Lady Zaynab salamullahi alayha. But the thing is, Lady Zaynab had all of this, and yet she never let those difficulties and those luxuries get to her head, as so to speak, in our language. She had complete control of her. She said, "The only thing I'm missing is my brother Hussein." As time progressed, there came a moment in time where Sayyida Zaynab and the moment of Karbala came when they were about to leave. Sayyida Zaynab comes to Abdullah ibn Ja'far al-Tayyar. Now what am I to do? Because in this narration, I've not come to Masa'ib yet, but this journey, the whole story of Sayyida Zaynab is Masa'ib. At every moment, there's musibah for Sayyida Zaynab. She says, "Oh my husband, you know my brother is to go and he is leaving. Abdullah ibn Ja'far al-Tayyar was very ill. He was not well. At that point in time, when he was very ill, she said, my brother is getting ready to leave from Medina. He's going towards Hajj, towards Mecca, and then on from there perhaps. He said, look, Abdullah, she says to her husband, she says, either one of two things will happen. You let me go and I join my brother. Or at the other level, my funeral will come from the other side. Hussein will leave and my funeral will come from the other side. I cannot be separated from Hussein. From our childhood we've been connected. He said, very well. He said, but listen, I'm ill, I can't go. But one thing I tell you this, these two sons, wait for a moment. He calls Aun and he calls Muhammad, the two sons of Sayyida Zaynab. And he says, I cannot go, but send these two on my behalf, Aun and Muhammad. And when it comes time to sacrifice, sacrifice them on my behalf. She said, very well. They set out and they go out towards Hajj and then from there towards Karbala and onwards. All of this happens. But Sayyida Zaynab's strength is what I want to highlight for you and I. Her power, her integrity, her sermons in Kufa and Sham that shook the takht and the taj of Yazid. How was it? How powerful was this lady? How immaculate was this lady? Do you know what happened when they got to the court of Ibn Ziyad? When they got to the court of Ibn Ziyad began to tell his men, I want you to introduce each of these women. Introduce this one, and introduce that one, introduce that one. He began to take the names. When he began to take the names, the riwayat say that there was a particular lady who the women began to circle her. They began to hide her. They began to cover her. When they began to hide her and try to cover her at that point in time, Ibn Ziyad's eyes fell towards that direction. He saw the circle coming, closer together. He said, who's that one? Who's the one that they're trying to cover over there? Tell me. Even Ibn Ziyad's own man said, be careful how you talk to her. Do you know who that is? That's the daughter of Ali ibn Abi Talib. Allahu Akbar. He said, bring her close. I want to speak to her. He begins to address her, and he begins to say what he begins to say. And Sayyida Zaynab responds at that moment, because as you know, Imam Sajjad also wanted to give his khutbah and his lecture, but they stopped him. Sayyida Zaynab stands up and she begins to speak. This is what I wanted to share with you that you may not have known. Ibn Afif al-Kindi was a companion of Rasulullah that was in the darbar of Ibn Ziyad. He had gone blind, he was very old. Ibn Afif al-Kindi is sitting there in the darbar, he's blind. He says, what am I hearing? How many years has it been? How many days has it been? Is Ali ibn Abi Talib in the darbar? Is Ali ibn Abi Talib in this courtyard? They said, Ibn Afif, maybe you've gotten too old. Maybe you're becoming senile. Ali has been gone for how many years? He says, no, by Allah, the sound that I am hearing in my ears is none other than the tone and the voice of Ali ibn Abi Talib. At that point in time, they said, Ibn Afif al-Kindi, this is not Ali, but rather Ali's daughter Zaynab who's speaking. Ibn Afif looked towards and faced in the direction of the voice of Ibn Ziyad. He said, oh Ibn Ziyad, do you not have any decency? Do you not have any integrity? Do you not have any honor that the daughter of Ali al-Murtaza is here, the granddaughter of Rasulullah is here, and you are treating her in this way, in this manner? Do you know what Ibn Ziyad said? Ibn Ziyad said, oh Ibn Afif al-Kindi, I honor your being a Sahabi, a companion of Rasulullah, I don't say anything to you. Allahu Akbar. Do you know what Ibn Afif al-Kindi said? He said, La'ana on you, O Ibn Ziyad, that you say that you honor me as a Sahabi and a companion of Rasulullah, and Rasulullah's granddaughter is in your darbar, and you have no decency? You don't honor her? What are you doing? What are you saying? At that point in time, Ibn Ziyad, he lost it. He said, sever the head of this man. Behead him, get rid of him. Do you know what happened? At that point in time, when he said behead and sever the head of this individual, at that point in time, according to the narration, there were people who were from Ibn Afif al-Kindi's tribe, the al-Kindi tribe. They were in the darbar of Ibn Ziyad. They said, Ibn Ziyad, do you think Ibn Afif al-Kindi doesn't have any relatives here? He doesn't have any tribesmen here? He doesn't have any followers here? If you touch him, we will sever your head. We will drain this entire building with blood. They said, very well. At that point in time, they said, we won't take him. Take him away and you all leave the darbar. They resulted. But Allahu Akbar. There is a moment in time where the Ahlul Bayt, they were relying and they had to say that there is someone to stand up for the honor and the dignity of the companions of Rasulullah. But there's no one to stand up for Sayyidatun Nisa al-Alameen's daughter. Allahu Akbar. What is the musibah of the Ahlul Bayt? Ajrukum ala Allah. But this statement of Sayyida Zaynab, she shook Sham, she shook Kufa and then she shook Sham. When she went to Sham, which was the darbar of Yazid, how did she change the dynamics? Allahu Akbar. Do you know what Yazid was reciting? Yazid, when she got to Sham, Yazid had his court with 700 men, all over from Byzantine, from Spain, from the far end of the east and the far end of the west, they were all in the court. The Romans, the Mongols, everyone was there. One representative at least from each. And he began to call out. And then he began to remember. I mentioned about Abu Talib the night before. The problem they had with Hussein, the problem they had with Zaynab, the problem they had was the problem that they had with their elders. Because Abu Sufyan himself used to say that there was no wahi. And Yazid himself said, Laibat Hashim bil mulk wala khabaran wala ja'a nazal. That there was no wahi, there was no revelation. It was all a game that Banu Hashim played. They were taking revenge for what had happened before. Do you know what he began to recite? Yazid was sitting on his throne and he began to recite, Tu'til mulka mimman tasha wa tanzurul mulka mimman tasha wa tu'izzu man tasha wa tudhillu man tasha. The verse of the Quran in front of these people. That Allah gives izzah, Allah gives honor to whoever He wills. And Allah gives mulk to whoever He wills. Allah gives the kingdom to whoever He wills. I have the kingdom, therefore Allah has willed it. Your brother died, therefore Allah willed it. Allahu Akbar. In that environment, Sayyida Zaynab, she gets up and she stands up and she looks him in the eye. And do you know what she says? She says, Yabnat Tulaqa. Do you know who you are? Yabnat Tulaqa. Who are the Tulaqa? The Tulaqa were those people who in the conquest of Mecca, Fateh Mecca, when nothing was left for them, Rasulullah said, I will give you amnesty. Anyone who goes to the house of Abu Sufyan has amnesty. I won't do anything. And of course in the conquest of Mecca, there was no bloodshed. But those people who said the kalima and said La ilaha illallah under the environment of Fateh Makkah or the conquest of Makkah, they were called the Tulaqa. And the idea was Tulaqa cannot be khulafa. Because there were questions around why they became Muslim. They became Muslim to save their life. Because Rasulullah said there's aman and amnesty for the one who goes to the house of Abu Sufyan. Therefore, they were never allowed to be khulafa. The question in that line, Sayyida Zaynab said, Yabnat Tulaqa. At that moment, she destroyed his whole argument and she said, how are you even calling yourself the Khalifa? You're the son of Tulaqa. You have no right. And then she goes, are you not the grandson of the one who ate the liver of Hamza? Is your blood not entrenched with opposing Islam? Are you not those people? How dare you sit on that throne? Who do you think you are? And then she recites the ayah of Surah Al Imran, the same one that he did. She continued and she responded to him over there. And then she continues and she says that, oh Yazid, the magnanimous statement that every Shia has on their heart, that she says, oh Yazid, no matter how hard you try and no matter what you do, you will never erase our memory from the hearts of the people. And how true it was. How true it was that the lines and the life of Sayyida Zaynab and her love is inscribed on our hearts. She gave, because right now, at that time, as they say, hindsight is 20/20. When you look back in history, it's very easy to tell. But at that moment, after they've lost, apparently, Zahiri, they've lost everything in Karbala, in Kufa and Sham, Sayyida Zaynab, what are you saying? That the people will be with you? And history showed only a few days later, the world, the love of Ahlul Bayt overflowed in their hearts and times shifted. This was Sayyida Zaynab. And then she said that beautiful line, Ma ra'aytu illa jamila. That I saw nothing but beauty. Allahu Akbar. When he taunted her and said, Allah has done this to you. Allah has made you go through misery. Allah has made you go through difficulty. She says, Ma ra'aytu illa jamila. My youth and my young ones, especially remember this. This is the best advice money can buy, period. Whether it's Sheryl Sandberg, executive in Facebook, or when Kobe Bryant's wife had to deal with the tragedy of losing her husband, the people who have the most wealth in the world, when they go to psychologists to ask them, what is one thing that we can do? You can read the works of Adam Grant and others. What is it that we can do to cope with loss? What is it when you lose your husband, when you lose your life, when you lose your child, when you lose your loved one? What is the best advice that money can buy? Gratitude, gratefulness. It's counterintuitive. But you think about the beautiful moments that you had with your loved one. You think about the beautiful moments and times that you had with your loved one. That's the best advice psychology can give you. Sayyida Zaynab said, you think we went through difficulty? Ma ra'aytu illa jamila. I saw nothing but beauty. Spend a lifetime analyzing this statement, it's not justice. What did she say at that moment, Sayyida Zaynab? Allah knows the position of Sayyida Zaynab. Who am I? The poet says, Khatm hai fasl kama bol rahi hai Zaynab. Allahu Akbar. Fasl is season. Kama is bow. You know bow and arrow? The season of bow and arrow has ended. Khatm hai fasl kama bol rahi hai Zaynab. Kaun bolega jahan bol rahi hai Zaynab. Khatm hai fasl kama bol rahi hai Zaynab. Kaun bolega jahan bol rahi hai Zaynab. तीरों शमशीरों सिनाहों के सितम के लश्कर तीरों शमशीरों सिनाहों के सितम के लश्कर थक गई सबकी ज़बां बोल रही है ज़ैनब थक गई सबकी ज़बां बोल रही है ज़ैनब और मुद्दतों बाद सुना है अली का लहजा मुद्दतों बाद सुना है अली का लहजा क्यों ना झूमेगी अज़ां बोल रही है ज़ैनब मुद्दतों बाद सुना है अली का लहजा क्यों ना झूमेगी अज़ां बोल रही है ज़ैनब और आखिरी मिसरा जिसके लिए ज़हमत दी कि ए यजीद इससे बड़ी हार तेरी क्या होगी अल्लाहु अकबर ए यजीद इससे बड़ी हार तेरी क्या होगी वो तेरा घर है जहां बोल रही है ज़ैनब ए यजीद इससे बड़ी हार तेरी क्या होगी वो तेरा घर है जहां बोल रही है ज़ैनब ए यजीद ओ यजीद What greater loss of yours than the fact that that is Yazid's own house where you are speaking to him like that? The victory of Sayyida Zaynab. Fill your hearts with the majesty. But tonight is the night to remember the musibah of Sayyida Zaynab. Sayyida Zaynab is that individual that she was the asara, the sahara, the support of everyone after Karbala. And even during Karbala, in the most difficult times, whether it was Layla or whether it was Rajab, or whether it was Farwa, every mother looked to Zaynab for strength. Allahu Akbar. You were just hearing in the poetry about Sayyida Zaynab. What difficulties, what tragedies, what calamities of Sayyida Zaynab. After Karbala, they are going, she's looking after Sakina at one point in time. She's looking after Rabab. Rabab has just lost Ali al-Asghar. And she's about to lose Sakina. At every moment, Sayyida Zaynab is not crying. She's looking after the mothers. Oh Layla, if she's there. Layla, that Ali Akbar is like my son. Do you know the musibah of Sayyida Zaynab? She never cried for Awna Muhammad. Do you know who she cried for? She cried for Ali Akbar. Because she raised Ali Akbar like her own. You know, there's a moment in time, according to riwayat, where Imam Hussein is bringing the body of Ali Akbar. And according to the riwayat, do you know what the ulama say? They say that it was as if Imam Hussein's body was going to leave, his soul was going to leave his body, he was going to die. When Sayyida Zaynab saw this, she threw herself on the ground. Why? So that Imam Hussein looks at her and he looks away from Ali Akbar's face. Because Ali Akbar was the most beautiful from Qamar Bani Hashim, from the house of Banu Hashim, after Abbas, with Abbas, the one who resembled Rasulullah most was Ali Akbar. Imam Hussein was about to die. Sayyida Zaynab threw herself on the ground. Do you know what the poet says? The poet says that how did Imam Hussein lift the body of Ali Akbar? How is it possible? Because Ali Akbar was about the same size of Imam Hussein. How do you lift the body of your son who you've just lost? He says that Sayyida Zaynab came to the tent. She came to the door of the tent and she saw Imam Hussein. And the poet captures the emotion of Sayyida Zaynab and the emotion of Imam Hussein. Hussein. What does he say? The poet says that Bibi Zaynab said, Lasha hai barabar ka, bhaiya se na uthega. Lasha hai barabar ka, bhaiya se na uthega. Main palne wali hu, godi mein utha lungi. That the poet says that Ali Akbar, Fatima Zahra's daughter Zaynab had raised Ali Akbar in her own hands. Oh my brother, you won't be able to lift Ali Akbar. I will take him in my own hands. Ajrukum ala Allah. My time is complete. After some time in Kufa, after some time in Sham, they were in the prisons and the dungeons. When they were in the dungeons, according to the riwayat, they were finally released. When Yazid gave the order for them to be released, Sayyida Zaynab said, we are not going anywhere. I am not going to go anywhere. I want to first do a majlis for my brother Imam al-Hussein, for my brother Aba Abdullah, ajrukum ala Allah. Because Zaynab had not cried for a year. She wanted to cry for her brother. When she wanted to cry, they had a room. When they got this room, they said, give us our looted property. When they got the looted property, they brought it one after the other. They were the heads of the shuhada. When the heads came, there was the head of Ali Akbar. Layla took the head. When the heads came, they say that there was the head of Qasim, Farwa took the head. There was the head of Ali Asghar. Rajab took the head. One after the other. The head of Abul Fadl al-Abbas came. The head of Imam Hussein came. Sayyida Zaynab took it. There were two heads that remained in the corner. No one took the heads. A lady said, it seems like their mother is not alive. These two moons are the most beautiful, but there's no one to cry for them. Sayyida Zaynab said, oh lady, don't say that. Those are my sons, Aun and Muhammad. But who is there to cry for the son of Fatima Zahra? Ajrukum ala Allah, ajrukum ala Allah. This qafila, this caravan, it proceeded towards Karbala. They were going towards Medina, but there was a fork in the road. When there was a fork in the road, at that point in time, Bashir said, who was the caravan leader, he came to Imam Sajjad. He said, one road to Karbala, one road to Medina. Where shall you go? Imam Sajjad came to Bibi Zaynab. He said, oh my aunt Zaynab, one road to Medina, one road to Karbala. Where will you go? She said, take me to Karbala. I want to see my brother Hussein. Ajrukum ala Allah. You know the riwayah. They get there and Sayyida Zaynab, she goes, and according to some riwayat, she goes straight to the Alqama. She goes straight to Nahr Furat. Why? Because she remembered Abul Fadl al-Abbas. Allah knows what she said there. Others say that she fell on the grave of Imam al-Hussein. Ajrukum ala Allah. Sayyida Zaynab, she went back. Afterwards, they gathered everyone together. Sayyida Zaynab is still the Sahara and the support for all the women. She's saying, Rajab, come, I am with you. She's saying, Layla, come, I am with you. Farwa, come, I am with you. She's supporting everyone. They get back to Medina. But do you know, when they got back to Medina, there's a moment where Sayyida Zaynab, she did not go home. When Sayyida Zaynab did not go home, she went and she sat away from her home. One day, Abdullah ibn Ja'far al-Tayyar, he went to Imam Sajjad. He said, O Sayyidul Sajideen, O Zainul Abideen, tell your aunt Zaynab that since she's come back from Medina, she has not come home. Tell her to come home. Imam Sajjad, he goes and he visits and he greets his aunt Zaynab and says, Oh my aunt Zaynab, your husband Abdullah ibn Ja'far al-Tayyar has said to please go home. Oh my aunt Zaynab, please go home. Allah knows what was going through the heart of Sayyida Zaynab and why she didn't go home. Azadaro, Bibi Zaynab uthi aur ek martaba mohalla Bani Hashim ke aage ke janib chali. Jab chali to ek marhala ye aaya ke daro diwar nazar aaye, ghar nazar aaya. Pata nahi kaun si yaadein thi. Bibi Zaynab ने दरवाजा खोला, दो मुसल्ले नजर आए. बीबी जो करबला से कूफा और शाम तलक ओनो मोहम्मद को न रोई, माँ का दिल भरा आया. एक जुमला कहा, ऐ ओन, ऐ मोहम्मद, माँ के लख्ते जिगर, माँ न रोई. हुसैन को रोने वाला कौन था? على لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. Ya Allah, bless this holy gathering. Ya Allah, by Bibi Zaynab, salamullahi alayha, grant all of those who are in difficulty, grant them deliverance from this difficulty. Ya Allah, anyone who is having a financial difficulty, grant them alleviation. By Abdullah ibn Ja'far al-Tayyar, by Baby Zaynab, grant them ease from their difficulty. Ya Allah, anyone who has a health issue, whether COVID or otherwise, Ya Allah, by Bibi Zaynab, by Aqila ibn Hashim, by Sani Khadija, grant them alleviation from their difficulty in this night. Ya Allah, allow us to learn from the lesson of Bibi Zaynab, salamullahi alayha, and allow us to be better followers of the Imam, the same way the Bibi was. And Ya Allah, hasten the reappearance of Imam Sahib al-Asri wal-Zaman, and allow us to be amongst his companions when he returns. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Ma'tam Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein.
یا حسین اہل حرم کو کل سے بہن عباس بن کر سنبھالو گی نا، وعدہ کرو اے بہن زینب، وعدہ کرو اے بہن زینب، احسان مجھ پر اتنا کرو، میرے سرہانے بیٹھی رہو، کیا سوچتی ہو مجھ سے کہو، میری وصیت بھی سنتی رہو، تم مجھ کو رو لو میرے سامنے، کل سے یہ آنسو چھپاؤ گی نا، وعدہ کرو اے بہن زینب، وعدہ کرو اے بہن زینب، جب بے کسی کے ماحول پر شام غریبا چھانے لگے، نانا کی امت جب اے بہن خیمے ہمارے جلانے لگے، جل جائے مسند میری مگر عابد کو میرے بچاؤ گی نا، وعدہ کرو اے بہن زینب، وعدہ کرو اے بہن زینب، نزدیک میرے آؤ ذرا، دیکھو نہ سن لے سکینہ کہیں، جاؤ گی جب قید خانے میں تم، بچھڑے گی تم سے یہ بچی وہیں، زندان میں تم بندھے ہاتھ سے قبر سکینہ بناؤ گی نا، وعدہ کرو اے بہن زینب، وعدہ کرو اے بہن زینب، بے گھور ہوگا میرا بدن، خاک شفا ہوگی میرا کفن، دیکھو رونا نہیں چین کھونا نہیں، تم کو مل جائے چادر یہ ہونا نہیں، تم اپنی چادر پیاری بہن کھا کے شفا کو بناؤ گی نا، وعدہ کرو وعدہ کرو اے بہن زینب، وعدہ کرو وعدہ کرو اے بہن زینب، اپنے ہی ہاتھوں پہ لایا تھا میں لاشا حسن کا تیروں بھرا، میت سے بھائی کی روتے ہوئے تم نے نکالے تھے تیرے جفا، ویسے ہی میرے لاشے سے تم تیروں کو آ کر نکالو گی نا، وعدہ کرو وعدہ کرو اے بہن زینب، وعدہ کرو وعدہ کرو اے بہن زینب، آنکھوں میں اس کے کئی خواب ہے، تم جانتی ہو وہ حساس ہے، وہ منتظر ہے دہلیز پر، اس کو جدائی کا احساس ہے، زینب ہماری مجبوریاں صغرا کو جا کر بتاؤ گی نا، وعدہ کرو وعدہ کرو اے بہن زینب، وعدہ کرو وعدہ کرو اے بہن زینب۔ سورۃ الفاتحہ۔
السلام علیکم یا رسول اللہ، السلام علیکم یا امیر المؤمنین، السلام علیکم یا فاطمہ الزہراء سیدۃ النساء العالمین، السلام علیکم یا امام حسن امام حسین سید شباب الجنہ، السلام علیکم یا بی بی زینب الکبریٰ، السلام علیکم مولاي ابو الفضل عباس ابن امیر المؤمنین وقاسم الحسن ومسلم بن عقیل وحانی بن حروہ وحبیب ابن مظاہر وحر الشہید الریاحی، السلام علیکم سادات جمیعا ورحمۃ اللہ وبرکاتہ، السلام علیکم مولا غبد مولا، السلام علیکم یا غریب الغرباء، السلام علیکم یا معین الضعفاء والفقراء، السلطان ابو الحسن علی ابن موسى الرضا کن شفیعنا وشفی والدینا فی یوم الجزاء ورحمۃ اللہ وبرکاتہ، السلام علیکم ائمۃ المسلمین علی ابن الحسین محمد ابن علی وجعفر ابن محمد وموسى ابن جعفر وعلی ابن موسى محمد ابن علی وعلی ابن محمد والحسن ابن علی والحجت ابن الحسن صلوات اللہ علیکہ، السلام علیکم یا صاحب العصر والزمان، علمان 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 یا شریک القرآن یا امام الانس والجان یا مظہر الایمان، السلام علیکم یا رسول اللہ اہل بیت النبوہ جمیع ورحمۃ اللہ وبرکاتہ، اللہم کل ولیک الحجت ابن الحسن صلواتک علیہ وعلی آبائہ فی هذه الساعة وفی کل ساعة ولیا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودلیلا وعینا حتی تسکنہ ارضک طوعا وتمتعہ فیہا طویلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. صلوات. اللهم صل على محمد.